Hi, welcome. So this is the second clip for this week's session on why anthropology is important. The first session of the Theoretical Perspectives course for undergraduates and 0013, and key ideas in social anthropology for the masters. That's ANTH 0131. The two courses are versions of each other, covering the basic concept of anthropology for students at both levels. I won't say any of that again. I'll take it for granted that we understand this, and I'll be talking to both cohorts of students at the same time for the rest of this course. So the first clip introduced us to some of the themes that we'll be covering, or the kind of broad rationale and remit and aims and objectives of this course. This clip here is more on housekeeping, certain things that you may be maybe on your mind regarding the tutorials, readings, seminars, essays, assessment, all those kinds of things. I should say that everything that I say is actually on Moodle, so just go onto Moodle and all of the information is available there, but I thought it'd be kind of nice to talk you through it as well in this clip, which is what I'll do. I think I already explained in the first clip how the online lectures, these clips that you'll be watching in advance, uploaded every Friday by 12 noon. For every following week, you'll have these clips to watch asynchronously. Then you'll have your tutorials if you're an undergraduate on Mondays and Tuesdays, face-to-face on Mondays, online on Tuesdays with Nargis and Priyanka respectively. Then on Wednesdays, if you're an undergraduate, you'll have a Q&A lecture with me, and it is your job in your tutorials to prepare a question to pose in the Q&A lecture, the online lecture, which is your opportunity to kind of really provoke discussion based on your readings, on the clips that you've watched, and on the tutorials. And Priyanka, Nargis, and myself will do our best to kind of riff off the issues that you raise and really pursue the discussion with you. The master's students will have their own seminar on Thursday afternoons, and similarly there will be your space to be able to pose questions, discuss, and so on. Now, for each tutorial and seminar for the masters, I have set 2 required readings. It is your obligation to read those readings to come to class. Sometimes you may not have the time because something happened. That's completely understandable. I generally think it's kind of appropriate, polite even, to write in advance to your tutor or myself and just tell them if you haven't been able to do the readings. I think it's a courtesy, because the success of a class depends on everyone having done the readings. So generally the default assumption is that you do that. Because it's so important, and because this theory course is of course taxing, it's a stretching, difficult course, I've kept readings to just 2 per week generally. I think maybe there's 1 or 2 exceptions, but generally about 50 pages, 60 pages a week to read, not more than that, because they're difficult pages sometimes. They're going to stretch you. And I've deliberately I was talking in the previous clip about the distinction between a theory course that just does theory and one that does history as well. And I explained that in this course, we've kind of enfolded history into theory. That means that if we're looking back in the history of anthropological theory and thinking, sometimes we'll have to read original texts written, you know, a century ago. And sometimes the way that those texts are written is quite old-fashioned, a bit dusty even, you might say. But I think it's really important for you as students to have that experience, to have read some Max Weber, to have read some Durkheim, to have read some Levi-Strauss for that matter. So, you know, I think that's an important aspect. So you have to read those readings, come to the class. Each class, both for the tutorials for the undergrads and for the seminars for the masters, is structured around 4 questions, which you'll find on Moodle. They're numbered 1, 2, 3, and 4. Each class will be split into subgroups 1, 2, 3, and 4, and each member of each subgroup has to prepare an answer before coming to the seminar or the class to that question. The questions are designed to home in on the most important issues that the week's topic should cover in relation to the readings. So they will give some structure to the conversation. Nargis and Priyanka will decide for themselves what they want to do with these questions, how they want to organize their sessions, but they're there as a kind of infrastructure for you to use. The undergraduates, I would request that as a passport for coming to the session, you upload your notes to Moodle. I've put a link on Moodle for you to be able to upload your notes each week on the question that your group is, the group that you belong to is asked to answer. So that we really have a kind of weekly engagement with you in that way. I've also put on Moodles for each session, in addition to the readings, a whole bunch of extra stuff, radio programs, clips from YouTube, other relevant materials for each week. Priyanka and Nargis are also free to do that. If you have come across something that's interesting, share it on the forum facility on Moodle. You can have a kind of open conversation with the cohort. I'm really, really keen on those conversations developing. Just something to say about the way that the reading list is structured. You have your required readings, and then you have some further readings, which I've generally tried to organize thematically to give you a little bit of guidance. Those are there for if you choose to do an essay on the topic of that week. They're not there, you're not expected to do all those readings for each tutorial. That would be absurd. I've really gone to great lengths to create a really complete reading list. I think for those of you who continue in anthropology for future research degrees, PhDs, things like that, many of our students every year decide to do that. I hope this will be a useful reading list to have for years to come, because it really kind of collects important contributions to each of the topics that we're covering, and I put a lot of work into it. So those are there for you when you want to go deeper into a topic, because you're doing an essay on it, right? So I'll talk a little bit more about essays later. Good. Just a few more things to say about readings in terms particularly of books that you might want to acquire. There's one book that we'll read cover to cover, almost. I think I've kind of spared you one chapter alone, is Lévi-Strauss's Totemism, which is a real classic of anthropology. It's not a very long book. That's why I thought that we could read the whole of it for 1 week. And it really allows you to go kind of quite deeply into understanding how structuralism, which is Lévi-Strauss's kind of theoretical contribution, operates in anthropology. It's a really worthwhile thing to do. It's what I was saying before about reading some of the classics and so on. If you feel that you can, by all means buy it. I think it's a good thing to have as an anthropology student. But if not, you can, I'm sure, get hold of a PDF. There's plenty of PDFs of these things kicking about on the internet. Since it's a classic, I even think there might be some legal ones, I hope, that you can download. And the same goes for the second book that I would recommend, which is Emile Durkheim's The Rules of Sociological Method, a real classic of social theory as a whole. This is beyond anthropology. We'll be talking about that next week. It's another good one to have. We'll be reading extracts for it, in fact, for the next week's lecture on society. So if you wanted to own that book, that's possibly a good one to have as well. On the PowerPoint that I'm going to upload to Moodle corresponding to these lectures, I have put a slide which has some very, very useful kind of encyclopedias, handbooks, kind of accompaniments to social theory in anthropology, which you may also find useful to buy one or more of these. There's actually one of them that's freely available on the internet, which is the Cambridge Encyclopedia of Anthropology. Just Google that. I put the link on the PowerPoint. You might find that very useful. It covers many of the topics that we'll be discussing as part of the course. Another thing that I wanted to say about how this course will run and the kind of ground rules of it. As you may know, those of you who are undergraduates will remember this from last year, UCL has a kind of feedback mechanism for all modules, which is called Opinio. So at the end of every module, you have the opportunity to provide some feedback on the experience of taking the module, what you thought of it, what you liked, what you didn't like, and so on. And that's actually incredibly useful for us for, obviously improving the module from year to year. And I've actually put on the Moodle site last year's Opinio for this module and my reaction to it. We're kind of required to say what we're going to do about fixing things that students draw to our attention, and all that's very well and good. But in the context of not least the kinds of conversations that I mentioned in the previous clip about making sure that our department is inclusive, properly inclusive, doesn't make anyone feel like a guest or an interloper or as if they don't belong in our department or the discipline or whatever. And in fact, provoked by comments that were made as part of the discussion of racism in anthropology, in the practices of our department, and so on, it has been brought to our attention that some students have felt that they've been, on the receiving end of microaggression, of comments that have made them feel uncomfortable. Those are things that I take extremely seriously, not only as a lecturer, but also as head of the department. Perhaps some of you are aware of the fact that I'm also head of the anthropology department. And this conversation on actively making our department an actively anti-racist, inclusive, non-discriminatory space is one that I take, enormously seriously. It's probably the most important thing on my agenda at the moment and this year. So in that spirit, I wanted to create a kind of space in which people can provide more anonymous, direct, and real-time feedback. So I put a link on the Moodle pages. I haven't done it yet for the master's page. I will do. I've done it for the undergrad. It's quite laborious to put these things into Moodle. It takes quite a lot of time, so I haven't got around to the master's yet, but it is there for the undergraduate one, and it will be there also for the master's, which is a link on kind of instantaneous feedback that you can provide to me. It is by default anonymous. If you wish to sign it, you can do so. Otherwise, I'll receive it anonymously. And that is a space in which you can talk about anything that is on your mind to do with your experience on this module, from the academic content, from ways in which you feel it requires further reflection on the question of decolonization, of inclusivity, ways in which I can include much more balance when it comes to the representation of readings, ways in which you felt perhaps, I hope not, but it may well happen because everyone has blind spots, uncomfortable during a lecture or a tutorial. I really would invite you to let me know through that mechanism. As I say, it is anonymous. Of course, with the anonymity goes a certain degree of responsibility. I hope that your comments will be respectful and not aggressive, because that is the ethos and the kind of deal that we have. I will always strive to be respectful and not aggressive to you, and so I hope that this will be reciprocal and that our relationship will be one of mutual support and respect, which is, I think, the only way really to make things better. Good. So finally, but I'm sure not least, let me talk about assessment. This course is examined by way of a single summative essay, both for the undergraduates and for the masters. So for ANTH 0013 for the undergraduates, the assessed essay is of 2,000 words. For the masters, which is ANTH 0131, it is of 3,000 words. The deadline for both of them is the first day of term 2, so you have the Christmas to do your essay. It's at 1 o'clock on Monday, the 11th of January of 2021. And all of the information that you need regarding what the format needs to be, what the marking criteria are, the penalties that UCL applies to essays that are either too long or too late. So if you submit your essay even by 1 minute late, you get penalized for that, I'm afraid. That's a UCL-wide policy with no flexibility. Similarly, you can't have an essay that's too long. That also gets penalized. the mechanism through which you can apply for an extension if you have extenuating circumstances, if you have a particular condition that means that you need more time to do assessed work, dyslexia, other forms of issues that, or health issues that are chronic, that might impede your way to your ability to complete work in a time frame. All that is explained on Moodle. It's probably been explained to you also in induction, and it's all in the student handbook. So all of that information is available. I won't go over it here. The one further thing to say is that all essays should be written on the topics essay questions that are on Moodle. There's a special tab in the tabs on the Moodle pages, both for the undergrad and for the postgrad modules, which have a very good selection of essay titles that you can choose from to do, covering the topics from all sorts of different angles. I think it's much better that you use those titles than try to make your own. In fact, I would advise you not to make your own titles. It doesn't usually help you provide develop a focused argument for your essay. The essay titles that I've designed are designed to kind of home in on particular issues that you can kind of think about and read about and write about. So please choose one of those essay titles. And finally, the undergraduates have the opportunity in November, the deadline is on Moodle, to submit also a formative essay, which is to say an essay that is not marked, that doesn't count towards your mark for this degree, but it's just a kind of exercise for you to get feedback on from the tutorial leaders, Nargis and Priyanka, who will be leading your tutorials, and to get a kind of mark, so you get a sense of how your essay writing is going. That is an essay that you should also do on the essay titles that are listed on Moodle, but it is very important that you don't do your formative essay and your summative essay, the one that counts that you do at the end of the course, on the same essay question. You can do it on the same topic because each topic has a number of essay questions related to it, but not the same essay question, because that would be unfair. You'd get an unfair advantage having received feedback on a kind of trial run of your essay to then submit an essay on the same topic. So we don't allow that. Finally, a kind of shout out to the writing tutor, Dalia Iskander, my colleague, who's fantastic. Any of you who feel that they could benefit from help with essay writing, but not least people who, for example, for whom English is not the first language, you can contact Dalia. Go onto the Moodle page on writing Moodle page. You'll find all of the information there. You can book a session and get support with that. It's very useful support that we provide as a department. Okay, I think that's all the housekeeping that I had to cover. There's one further clip of this lecture, which I encourage you to watch, which will engage with some of the kind of theoretical framework that we'll require as we go through the course in coming weeks. So see you there.